Welcome back. So in this video, we'll be discussing about the Active Directory FSMO roles. So basically, the Active Directory is the central repository in which all objects in an enterprise and their respective attributes are stored. So it is a hierarchical multi-master enabled database which is capable of storing millions of objects. So because it is a multi-master, changes to the database can be processed at any given domain controller in the enterprise, regardless of the whether the domain controller is connected or disconnected from the network. So initially, understanding about multi-master model. So basically, a multi-master enabled database such as Active Directory provides the flexibility of allowing changes to occur at any domain controller in the enterprise. But it also introduces the possibility of conflicts that can potentially lead to problems once the data is replicated to the rest of the enterprise. And on way Windows deals with conflicting updates is by having a conflict resolution algorithm, so which handles the discrepancies in values by resolving to the domain controller to which the changes were written last. And basically, the last return is whenever a replication happens, so wherever the changes made last, so that takes the upper hand, so while discarding the changes in all other domain controllers. And although this resolution method may be acceptable in some cases, so there are times when conflicts are just too difficult to resolve using the last writer wins approach. So in such cases, it is best to prevent the conflict from occurring rather than to try to resolve it after the fact. And for certain type of changes, so Windows incorporates methods to prevent conflicting Active Directory updates from occurring. And further understanding about the single master model. Basically, to prevent conflicting updates in Windows, the Active Directory performs updates to the certain objects in the single master fashion. So in a single master model, only one domain controller in the entire directory is allowed to process the updates. So basically, the Active Directory extends the single master model from that is found in earlier versions of Windows, that is in Windows NT, so to the new multiple roles and the ability to transfer roles to any domain controller in the enterprise. And because an Active Directory role is not bound to any particular single DC, so it is referred to as a flexible single master operation role. So basically, there are five type of FSMO roles are there. That is flexible single master operations role. So that is a schema master, domain naming master, RID master, PDC emulator, and infrastructure master. So initially understanding about the schema master FSMO role. So basically the schema master FSMO role holder is the domain controller that is responsible for performing the updates to the schema directory. And this domain controller is the only one that can process updates to the directory schema. And once the schema update is complete, so it is replicated from the schema master to all other domain controllers in the directory. And there is only one schema master per directory. And coming to the domain naming master. So basically the domain naming master FSMO role holder is the domain controller that is responsible for making changes to the forest-wide domain namespace of the directory. And this domain controller is the only one that can add or remove domains from the directory or to the directory. And also it can add or remove the cross references to domains in external directories. And understanding about the RID master FSMO role. So basically the RID master FSMO role holder is the single domain controller responsible for processing the RID pools request from all domain controllers within a given domain. and it is also responsible for removing an object from its domain and putting it in another domain during an object move. And also, when a domain controller creates a security principal object such as a user or a group, so it attaches a unique SID. So basically, we call it as security ID. So to the object, and this SID consists of a domain SID and the relative ID, and that is unique for each security principal, that is SID, created in a domain. And for the understanding about the RID master rule, so each Windows domain controller in a domain is allocated a pool of RIDs. So that is also that is allowed to assign to the uh, security principles it creates. And when a domain controller's allocated RID pools falls below the threshold, so the domain controller issues a request for additional RIDs so to the domain controllers, uh, where the RID master is going to issue the new pool of SIDs. So basically, the domain RID master responds to the request that is given by the RID master. So basically, by retrieving the RIDs from the domain's unallocated RID pool and assigns them to the pool of a requesting domain controller. And also, this is there is only one RID master per domain, and you cannot have more than one RID masters in each domain. And further understanding about the PDC emulator FSMO rule. So basically, the PDC emulator emulates the um, older version of NT. So basically, the PDC emulator is necessary to synchronize time in an enterprise, and also Windows includes the W32 time, that is Windows time service that is required by the Cobra's authentication protocol. And all Windows-based computers within an enterprise uses a common time, and basically the purpose of the time service is to ensure that the Windows time service uses a hierarchical relationship so that controls authority and does not permit loops to ensure the appropriate common time usage. And also the PDC emulator of a domain is authoritative for the particular domain, and also the PDC emulator at the root of the forest becomes the authoritative for the enterprise and should be configured to gather the time from an external source. And all primary domain controllers or all PDC FSMO role holder follow the hierarchy of domains in the selection of their inbound time partner. And also, the password changes performed by other domain controllers in a domain are replicated preferentially to the PDC emulator. And also, the authentication failures that occur at the given domain controller in a domain becomes an incorrect password or forwarded to the PDC emulator before a bad password failure message is reported to the user. And account lockout basically is processed by the PDC emulator. And for the understanding about infrastructure master FSMO rule. So basically, when an object in a domain is referenced by another object in another domain, so it represents the reference by GUID, the SID. So basically, that is the security identifier, and the D undistinguished name. So the infrastructure FSMO role holder is the domain controller which is responsible for updating an object's SID and the distinguished name in a cross-domain object reference. And this infrastructure master role should be held by a domain controller that is not a global catalog server. So if the infrastructure master role runs on a global catalog server, so it will stop updating the object's information because it does not contain any references to the objects that is not that is holding. And also that is the important reason why the global catalog server holds the partition Basically, the global catalog server stores the partial replica of the every object in the forest, and as a result, so the cross-domain object references in the domain will not be updated, and a warning to the uh, basically that will take effect, and also where the locked on domain controllers event log will be updated. And that's all for the understanding of the FSMO roles, and we'll discuss the remaining topics in the upcoming videos. Until then, bye bye.